A healer's defiance. The warning sirens of Helios 7 Medical Research Station pierced the artificial night, their urgent wail echoing through sterile corridors. Dr. Lyra Novak's fingers flew across the holographic interface, her dark eyes reflecting the cascade of genetic data streaming before her. The mutation patterns were unmistakable. This was no natural evolution of the Crimson Plague. Someone had engineered it. Computer, seal laboratory doors, authorization Novak Theta 9, she commanded, her voice steady despite the gravity of her discovery. The lab's reinforced barriers slid into place with a pneumatic hiss, buying her precious minutes to document her findings. The Galactic Concordat had claimed the Crimson Plague was a natural occurrence, a tragic but inevitable consequence of interspecies contact. They'd used it to justify quarantining entire systems, marking them as contaminated zones that required their direct oversight. But the virus's structure told a different story, one of careful design and deliberate release. A shadow fell across her workstation. "Dr. Novak," came a silken voice that made her blood freeze. "Working late again?" She turned to face Archon Zenith, the Concordat's chief overseer for the Helios sector. His crystalline form caught the lab's harsh lighting, fracturing it into rainbow patterns across the walls. Like all prismations, his transparent body housed swirling clouds of luminescent gas that shifted with his moods. Right now, they roiled with dark purpose. "Archon," she acknowledged, discreetly pressing the transmit button on her data pad. "I was just reviewing some anomalous readings from the latest outbreak." "Anomalous?" His voice carried the hint of a threat. "I trust nothing too concerning." "That depends," Lyra replied, straightening her spine, "on whether you consider engineered bioweapons concerning." The swirling gases within Zenith's form turned stormy gray. "A serious accusation, Doctor. One that could have grave consequences for your career, and your freedom. The evidence is already transmitted to every major medical facility in the sector," she bluffed, praying the encryption protocols had worked fast enough. "The genetic markers are clear. This plague isn't natural, it's a weapon, and the Concordat is using it to expand its control." Zenith's form pulsed with angry red light. "Humans," he spat, the word dripping with contempt. "Always assuming the worst of your betters. The Concordat maintains order. We prevent chaos. Sometimes that requires difficult decisions." "Difficult decisions?" Lyra's voice rose with controlled fury. "You're killing millions to justify your expansion. That's not order, it's genocide." The Archon's crystalline fingers lengthened into razor-sharp points. "You could have been valuable to us, Dr. Novak. Your brilliance, properly directed, might have served a greater purpose. Instead, you choose to be a problem." His form began to glow with building energy. "And the Concordat has ways of dealing with problems." Lyra's hand found the emergency release beneath her workstation. "So do I." She slammed the control, and clouds of sterilization gas erupted from ceiling vents. The caustic mixture wouldn't harm her through her medical shield, but it would play havoc with Zenith's crystalline structure. The Archon's scream of rage turned to one of pain as microscopic fractures appeared across his surface. Lyra didn't waste the opportunity. She grabbed her data pad and sprinted for the emergency exit, her heart pounding against her ribs. The station's corridors blurred past as alarms continued to wail. She needed to reach the communication hub, her earlier transmission had been blocked, she was certain of it. The truth had to get out. Heavy footsteps behind her announced the arrival of Concordat security forces. Energy bolts sizzled past her head, leaving scorch marks on the pristine walls. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with a medical droid. "Sorry about this," she muttered, grabbing its auxiliary power cell and hurling it behind her. The resulting explosion wouldn't hurt the pursuing guards, but it would slow them down. The communication hub's doors loomed ahead, its security panel glowing red. Lyra's fingers danced across the keypad, entering override codes she'd hoped never to need. The door slid open with agonizing slowness. She had just reached the main console when something sharp pierced her shoulder. The world began to spin as she turned to see Zenith, his form still showing signs of damage, holding a dart gun. "Sleep well, Doctor," his voice echoed as darkness crept into her vision. "When you wake, we'll discuss your new assignment, in a facility where your misguided morality won't interfere with progress." Lyra's last thought before consciousness fled was a prayer that someone, somewhere, had received her data. The truth had to survive, even if she didn't. The darkness took her, and with it, any hope of a quick resolution to the Concordat's crimes. But they had made one critical mistake: they had assumed that imprisoning her would be enough to silence her. They were about to learn that human determination, especially when paired with a healer's oath to do no harm, was a force that could reshape galaxies. The beast within. The containment cell on Shadowhaven hummed with suppressed energy, its obsidian walls seeming to absorb what little light the facility's generators provided. Dr. Lyra Novak sat with her back against the cold surface, her medical whites now stained and torn after weeks of imprisonment. But it was her cellmate that drew the anxious stares of passing guards. The creature called Fenris prowled the opposite side of the cell, its form shifting between states like oil on water. One moment it appeared almost humanoid, the next it was something ancient and terrible, all teeth and shadow. The guards whispered that it was the last of the Morphborn, a species so dangerous the Concordat had hunted them to near extinction. "Your heart rate elevates when you watch me change," Fenris observed, its voice a resonant growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Fear?" "Curiosity," Lyra replied. "I'm a doctor. Understanding biological impossibilities is something of a specialty." A sound like dark laughter filled the cell. "And what of your own impossibility, healer? 3 weeks in my presence, yet you still breathe. Most last days at most. Maybe I'm not as tasty as your usual cellmates. Or perhaps," Fenris's form solidified into something wolf-like but wrong, too angular, too aware, "you are exactly what I've been waiting for." Their conversation was interrupted by the heavy tread of armored boots. Commander Thalara appeared at the cell's barrier, her scaled face unreadable. The Saurian security chief had been a constant, if unwelcome, presence during Lyra's imprisonment. "Your execution is scheduled for tomorrow, Doctor," Thalara announced, her voice carrying no emotion. "The Concordat doesn't wish to risk your inconvenient discoveries spreading further." "Funny thing about truth, Commander," Lyra stood, brushing off her clothes. "It has a way of surviving despite everyone's best efforts." "The truth?" Thalara's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of agitation in her species. "You know nothing of truth. The Concordat maintains order. Without us. Without you, millions would still be alive," Lyra cut in. "How many more will die from your engineered plague while you hide behind words like order and necessity?" The commander's hand strayed to her weapon. "Careful, Doctor. Your last hours need not be uncomfortable." An interesting choice of words, Fenris spoke, drawing both women's attention. "Hours. Time. Such fluid concepts in a place like this." Its form rippled. "Did you know, Commander, that Morphborn can alter not just space, but time itself?" Thalara's scales paled. "Impossible. That ability was bred out of your kind generations ago." "Many things are impossible," Fenris's grin showed too many teeth. "Until they aren't." The lights flickered, and darkness rolled through the cell like fog. When visibility returned, both Lyra and Fenris were gone, leaving Commander Thalara staring at an empty cell, her scaled hand shaking on her weapon. The truth was, Morphborn couldn't manipulate time. But they could manipulate perception, and in the labyrinthine depths of Shadowhaven, perception was everything. Lyra found herself being pulled through impossible spaces, reality bending around them as Fenris guided them through gaps in the facility's security. Why help me? She gasped as they emerged in a maintenance tunnel, her mind still reeling from the impossible journey. Because, Doctor, Fenris's form stabilized into something almost human. You're not the only one who's discovered the Concordat secrets. But you might be the only one who can help me stop them. Unlikely allies. The underground research facility on Nexus Prime hadn't seen visitors in decades, its corridors thick with dust and abandoned dreams. Dr. Raven Vale, once the Concordat's leading xenobiologist, now a recluse and suspected traitor, waited in its heart. Her laboratory was a maze of ancient equipment and glowing containment tubes, each holding fragments of research too dangerous for the light of day. The plague wasn't their first attempt, Vale explained, her augmented eyes casting blue light across her workstation. The Concordat has been experimenting with biological warfare for centuries. But this. She gestured to a holographic display of the virus's structure. This is different. Lyra studied the rotating model, Fenris a dark presence at her shoulder. Different how? It's not just designed to kill. Vale's artificial fingers danced across the controls, highlighting specific genetic markers. It's designed to evolve, to adapt to any cure we might develop. But more than that, it's designed to make the Concordat necessary. A disease that can only be controlled by their intervention, Lyra breathed. Creating an endless cycle of dependency. Precisely. Vale's expression darkened. I helped create the early versions, before I understood their true purpose. My expertise in xenogenetics made me valuable, and complicit. Fenris moved closer to the display, its form rippling with barely contained anger. The attack on my people. Was that also your work? Vale met the creature's shifting gaze without flinching. No. But I knew about it. The Morphborn were too powerful, too independent. The Concordat couldn't control you, so they decided to eliminate you instead. And now they plan to control every species through fear of disease, Lyra concluded. Unless we can stop them. We might have a chance. Vale retrieved a data crystal from a hidden compartment. I've spent years developing this, a universal vaccine. Not just a cure for the current plague, but a way to prevent the virus from evolving further. With this, their control breaks. A distant alarm shattered the moment. Vale's augmented eyes flashed with incoming data. They've found us. Concordat forces, at least 2 squads. They must have tracked your escape from Shadowhaven. Time to leave, Fenris growled, its form becoming more predatory. No, Vale thrust the crystal into Lyra's hands. You have to go. Get this to Oracle Nyx on Asteria. She has the connections to distribute it galaxy-wide. I'll hold them here. That's suicide, Lyra protested. It's redemption. Vale smiled sadly. Now go. Your friend isn't the only one with tricks up their sleeve. As if to prove her point, the laboratory's defensive systems hummed to life, ancient weapons emerging from hidden panels. The sound of approaching troops echoed through the corridors. Dr. Vale. Lyra started. Go. Vale's augmentations glowed with building power. Make it count. Fenris pulled Lyra away as Vale turned to face the entrance, her body crackling with stored energy. The last thing they saw before reality bent around them was Vale standing tall, decades of guilt and regret transformed into one final act of defiance. They emerged on a different world, under alien stars, the data crystal clutched in Lyra's hand like a lifeline. The key to stopping the Concordat's plans, bought with blood and sacrifice, now rested with them. What now? Fenris asked, its form settling into something between wolf and shadow. Lyra stared at the crystal, thinking of Vale's sacrifice, of the millions already lost to the plague, of the Concordat's arrogant assumption that they could control life itself. Now, she said, her voice hard with determination, we find Oracle Nyx and show the galaxy what happens when you try to chain the human spirit. Breaking chains. The crystalline spires of Asteria rose like frozen lightning against a violet sky. In the depths of the metropolis's shadow markets, Oracle Nyx held court in a chamber of living biotech, its walls pulsing with neural activity. The Oracle herself was a striking figure, her silver skin marked with glowing circuits, her eyes holding the wisdom of 1,000 shared minds. "The vaccine is incomplete," Nyx announced, examining Vale's crystal through both physical and psychic senses. "Brilliant work, but missing a crucial element." Lyra's heart sank. "What element?" "A catalyst," Nyx's circuits pulsed with thought. "Something to bind the components and allow for universal distribution." "Something like?" Her gaze fixed on Fenris. "Morph-born genetic material." Fenris went very still. "My blood?" "Your entire genetic structure. The morph-born ability to adapt and change, it's exactly what the vaccine needs to work across all species." Nyx's expression softened. "But the process would be fatal." Silence filled the chamber. Lyra looked at Fenris, her throat tight. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Fenris said quietly. "And you know it, Doctor. The question is whether one life is worth millions." "It's not just any life," Lyra protested. "You're the last of your kind." "No," Fenris's form rippled with something like amusement. "I'm what's left of my kind. There's a difference." It turned to Nyx. "What must be done?" The process was quick, clinical, and final. Lyra worked with tears in her eyes, combining Fenris's freely given genetic material with Vale's vaccine. Nyx provided the facilities and the psychic strength needed to stabilize the mixture. Through it all, Fenris never wavered. "Remember," were its last words, form already beginning to dissolve, "they thought they could chain us. Show them how wrong they were." The completed vaccine glowed with inner light, power radiating from its perfect fusion of science and sacrifice. But their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the facility. "Concordat forces," Nyx announced, her circuits flashing with incoming data. "They've found us. Archon Zenith himself leads them. Can we distribute the vaccine before they reach us?" Lyra asked, securing the precious vials. "No," Nyx's expression turned fierce. "But we can do something better. Their biological weapons facility orbits this very world. With my connections and your knowledge, we can turn their own facility against them," Lyra finished. "Use their distribution system to release the vaccine instead of the plague." "It's suicide," one of Nyx's assistants protested. "It's justice," Lyra corrected, thinking of Vale's sacrifice, of Fenris's final gift. "And it's time. Humanity's triumph." The Concordat's biological weapons facility was a masterpiece of engineering and a monument to hubris. Its sterile corridors and secure labs held enough weaponized disease to cleanse 1,000 worlds. But today, those same systems would deliver salvation instead of death. Lyra, Nyx, and a handful of resistance fighters fought their way through increasingly heavy opposition. The Oracle's psychic abilities and the rebels' determination carved a path to the central distribution hub. But Archon Zenith awaited them there, his crystalline form now augmented with combat systems. "Did you think we wouldn't notice?" he sneered, energy crackling around him. "That we wouldn't track every movement, every alliance?" His form expanded, filling the chamber with lethal beauty. "Humans. So predictable in their defiance." "Predictable?" Lyra's laugh held no humor. "You still don't understand us at all." She held up the vaccine. "We don't just defy. We transform. We take your weapons and turn them into cures. We face your monsters and find allies instead of enemies. And we remember," Nyx added, her circuits blazing with gathered psychic energy. "Every life you've taken, every species you've tried to chain. We remember, and we share those memories across 1,000 worlds." Zenith's attack was devastating, but they were ready. While Nyx's psychic shield absorbed the Archon's fury, Lyra sprinted for the distribution controls. Security protocols crumbled before the Oracle's cyber assault, and resistance fighters held the doors against waves of Concordat troops. "You'll destroy everything," Zenith raged. "The order we've built, the peace we maintain." "No," Lyra's fingers flew across the console, initiating the facility-wide distribution. "We're saving everything. Real peace doesn't come from chains. It comes from choice." The vaccine entered the facility's systems like a tide of light. Emergency protocols activated, interpreting it as a priority delivery. Across the facility, across the sector, across the galaxy, delivery systems designed to spread death now carried its opposite. Zenith's final attack shattered Nyx's shields and sent Lyra crashing into the controls. But it was too late. The vaccine was already spreading, its morphborn enhanced structure adapting and protecting every species it encountered. The Concordat's greatest weapon had become its undoing. In the days that followed, the truth could no longer be contained. The Concordat's crimes were exposed, their control crumbling as protected populations rose up against their would-be masters. Lyra survived, though the scars of her journey would remain. Nyx's network ensured that the stories of Vale and Fenris would never be forgotten, tales of sacrifice in the name of freedom. The Galactic Council chambers, once dominated by Concordat influence, now echoed with new voices. Lyra stood at the podium, her medical whites restored, speaking to representatives of 1,000 worlds. "We face a choice," she declared. "We can live in fear of our differences, try to control what we don't understand. Or we can embrace those differences, learn from them, grow with them." She smiled, thinking of a shapeshifter who taught her about the true meaning of humanity. After all, in the end, we're all part of the same cosmic dance. And no one has the right to decide who leads. The chambers erupted in approval, and a new era began. The Concordat's mistake hadn't been underestimating humanity's defiance, it had been underestimating humanity's capacity for change, for sacrifice, for hope. In trying to chain the human spirit, they had instead unleashed its full potential, transforming not just themselves, but the entire galaxy. In the medical research station where it all began, a new plaque hangs in the main laboratory. It bears only a few words, but they echo across the stars. "To those who taught us that the strongest chains are the ones we break together."